Hello and welcome to Pair Reflections, a proud member of the Doof Network where we reflect on Wildbow's most scholastic work as it releases. I'm Reuben Morehouse.
And I'm Elliot Diebold.
And as is tradition for our reflecting episodes, this episode reflecting on Gone Ahead, we've brought in some guests. We have Camtist, Side Zero, and the White Duke, all players from the Mile End campaign that we covered on this show a while back. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey.
I'm Camtist. I wrote the character Gail Newman.
I'm Side Zero, and I'm responsible for Bobby Hall.
And I'm the White Duke, and I take no responsibility for Tara.
I love that vibe of taking responsibility for your characters.
Someone has to. Bobby's not going to.
Oh, boy.
So, of course, we've brought you three on to just share ruminations about Pale in general and obviously Gone Ahead, this arc 7 in particular.
Mm-hmm.
Let's first give a bit of an arc summary because, again, it was a long one. A lot of stuff happened in it. So at the start of this arc in 7.1, Verona and the gang are catching up on what they missed at school, and we finally get a bit of Oni goss, and then the Canteers call in some backup others.
Yes, and then we launched into 7.2, which is the one where Lucy helped Avery, John, and the goblins TP Bristow's place. And then they all made it back to the workshop they were staying in to get a good night's sleep before they all got kicked out, and Lucy did some therapy.
Then in 7.3, you had Avery and the gang send Elpie home among the forest, discuss some tactics, and then get attacked by a terrifying bag-headed arena monster.
And then, in the Borrowed Eyes comic, Alexander saves the Earth and carpools. We see the world through Bristow's eyes via Alexander as he begins his infiltration of Sergeant Hall.
In 7.4, Nicolette brings Bristow's pitch of peace, taxes, and tyranny to Avery and the gang. They come up with a counteroffer of their own, giving Bristow's thanks to the brownies. They keep it up their sleeve for 5 whole minutes before pulling the trigger and running off to class.
It's crazy to me to think just how slapdash their plans were and that it all managed to work out.
It was great. They were like, we'll do it later, and then they didn't.
Yeah. And then it all just kind of, well, I don't know if worked out is necessarily the word, but it started the snowball rolling downhill at least. So in 7.5, Ray attempts to teach everyone all the cool ways you can otherize objects or objectify others, but for some reason the class is distracted. After things wrap up, Shelley impersonates Durocher and picks a fight with the Kenneteers.
And then we jumped into 7.6, which follows Verona sort of scrambling to come up with a plan as Avery and Lucy do most of the work against Shelley. Just as the brownies show up and things are looking to go bad, a couple of quick trips to the ruins and some help from Ray fend everything off for now.
Then in 7.8, we have an interlude with good old Kevin. We see in his head, and he has a interesting dinner with his friends and some practitioners, then directly breaks into Alexander's domain. There he tries to find out more about the world, for Bristow guides him in the direction of murdering children.
And then in 7.7, Avery and the students get a special guest lecture from the prestigious Toad Swallow before Bristow and Musser show up to beat up some children and kill Lila. As Lucy and Verona get captured, Avery is pushed into the ruins.
In 7.8, we get back to Verona's angle on the fight with Bristow and his cronies. Almost snatched by the brownies, Verona convinces them to give her a few more hours to beat Bristow before she and Lucy are captured. Tedwood gives a rousing speech about how we live in a society, and maybe Bristow's one of those heroes who kills kids for the right reasons. Luckily, with some help from their friends, and America, they escape and Verona begins her revenge plans.
Yes, in Can We Talk About the Girls, Jazz gathers the relevant Kenneteer parents to discuss how they're all secretly practitioners. We don't see that part, but I'm assuming that happens. They also just discuss how things are going with the trio in general. We learn how Avery's dad is kind of useless, and honestly, I'm starting to suspect Verona's dad, Brett, isn't too great of a parent either. Despite all the other connection blockers and stuff, Matthew and Edith happen to come up in the topic of conversation as an oddity.
Yep, and then we jump straight back into the Blue Heron conflict in 7.9. Avery's getting her wounds tended to by new best friend Jess, and Snowdrop and her reconnect and share some chocolate, or various kinds of chocolate. Then the final battle begins as Avery literally uses the power of friendship to win the day.
And in the last portion of the chapter, 7.x, we get Alexander's perspective and see before when he and his friends were young and carefree, but still kind of shitty. Now, when he's super shitty, and after John shoots him in the head and scars Lucy forever.
Good times. A good end to the chapter. What a chapter it was as well. What did we all think of it?
I really love that interlude. It's one of my favorite interludes in the story so far.
The Alexander interlude.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't trust it.
As you should.
That something felt off the entire time. Something felt off about Alexander's death. I feel like
Are we putting our tinfoil hats on already? What are you trying to say?
I didn't believe it when he got shot, and I'm still worried.
It was secretly Shelley, glamoured up to look like a shot Alexander, but actually...
But did we ever see the body?
Well, I mean...
Lucy definitely.
Yes.
Lucy did. Lucy saw too much.
Yeah. I don't think he bought it either, in terms of he was so convinced that he had everything under control and that he was going to unveil his master plan that it caught him as off guard as it did the rest of us.
Oh yeah, that's probably what was throwing me off. It just seemed so sudden.
He was absurdly confident that entire back half, where he's just like, you see, I called the lords in Moscow. They're gonna take out Ray for me, and 2 minutes later, he's taken care of by John.
Yeah, it's that vibe that you see in, I think it happened in 80s movies a lot, where the villain is so sure of themselves that they almost can't believe that they're getting beaten as it's happening, right? And it's such a cathartic feeling for someone so smug to be in disbelief that they're dying.
Absolutely.
It's a very fun, I mean, maybe I feel bad calling it cathartic, but it is a very fun.
It was really cathartic, not gonna lie.
It was very cathartic, yeah.
I also want to pull out the Can We Talk About the Girls chapter, because what a great chapter that was. I don't know what it was, but the vibe of just characters' parents talking about them is so much fun.
If you had told me that would have been a chapter at the beginning of the story, it's interesting. It's a lot more interesting than I'd expect.
Yeah.
Because it has the tension of Avery's plot line's been running in the background, and we see VD as an actual person. We get his name.
Brett.
Yeah, I agree. It's so interesting because it's something you just don't see very often in books with young teenage protagonists, is actually a chapter that steps aside and treats their parents like people.
Yeah.
That other side of the coin isn't usually considered as much. And it was a nice break because it takes place right in the middle of the peak of the Blue Heron stuff going down. It's right between Verona starting her 3 moves against Bristow. So it's this nice sort of little break from the core action, I suppose.
They're relaxing.
Yeah, I think most of the time you get these young adult novel sort of situations where you've got these young protagonists and the audience you're sort of expecting to be in their head, siding with them. And it's very much, we're kids, we know what we're doing, parents suck. But I think Wildbow has enough sort of practice by now with going outside of the traditional perspective and trusts his audience to some degree that we can jump into, the stuffy old parents. And genuinely, some of them are awful parents. And still, respect that as, a genuine human point of view.
Yeah, I think it's that treating them as people that really makes the difference. I think a lot of young adult stuff, it treats parents as these figures or as the enemy or something.
Dumb boomers who are they don't understand us.
Yeah.
I feel that's definitely Verona's point of view, at least. Which is true in her case, but...
Yeah, exactly.
It is undeniably true to an extent that they don't understand them.
Yeah, but I think that's why it works, because it is true, but while both sort of treating them as people and sort of exploring a bit why that's the case, as opposed to just having it be true and gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It's also kind of fascinating to see Brett. It's not just that it's the usual Brett, but we see how it's a lot subtler here, and how these parents might not be able to pick up on it as well. And Avery's mom and Lucy's mom definitely have, but it's not quite as clear cut in just this circumstance alone.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, Avery's dad volunteers to hang out with him afterwards,
Yeah.
so like he clearly didn't get it.
I mean, I think he's pretty oblivious in general, so I'm not totally surprised he's fallen straight into that trap.
God.
The double speak there, where he's like, "Oh, I'm thinking that my daughter's getting willful and shouting at me, and maybe we should send her to one of those camps." Where, as someone who actually knows what Brett's like, we're just cringing in horror at the potential for that. But the other parents are like, maybe that's not a great idea, but I can see where you're coming from.
I really appreciate Jazz just being there, being like the voice of reason.
Absolutely.
Avery's mom gets good points too.
Yeah, they're definitely the standouts.
Just that, have you considered listening to what your daughter's saying as this revolutionary worldview?
Yeah, that's not. Avery's parents don't have as much experience of that.
I thought the jumping around to the other bonus material, the Borrowed Eyes comic was amazing. I thought it was another one of those places where the interweaving of the text and the visual medium stuff was, I think, really well done. It just added something that the cool practiciness of it, right? Where he's pulling out his own eye and sticking it in a bird and combining bits of Bristow together. It's all if it had just sort of been described in general, it wouldn't have that real mysticism about it.
I think it was one of the most showing aspects of Alexander as well, because he slowly and methodically laid out his years of groundwork against Bristow for this with disturbing methods.
Yeah, I really loved how it didn't shy away from. I mean, Alexander clearly saw no problem with things that he had done to collect, Bristow's seed, etc. But for us as the audience, it really just is another beat in this tapestry of practitioners are the fucking worst.
Well, in defense of practitioners, even Wise just kind of he's asking Alex to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
What was it? There's also that mention about how they had to say that they didn't have that Alex didn't get Nicolette to collect it, and
oh my god,
why do you even need to say that?
Yeah.
Jeez.
They
fact
really
to specify isn't a good look.
It also builds on how he's mentioned previously. He has dirt on every single one of his apprentices. He managed to forswear Seth that way. This is a guy that takes every relationship with how can I backstab them brutally later.
Where have we seen that before in the students?
I think that's the key difference, because you can look at the Kenneteers and they're kind of having to do the same thing to all of the others of Kennet.
Yeah,
we've had extra material about them wanting, or how they can bind or trap each one, and the difference is they feel shitty about it. They're like, this is something we need to do, whereas Alexander was just sort of like, yeah, this is good safety insurance,
Well, I wonder
smart.
if Alexander felt shitty about it when he was first collecting his, information and pieces and stuff. But after he's been doing it long enough, he's kind of justified it to himself.
It's just who he is now, I guess.
Standard operating procedure.
And to further differentiate the two, the girls, they're going to the judges to get a warrant for this. It's not maybe John's looking at me weirdly, I'm gonna look up how to bind dogs of war. They're getting warrants and stuff and having to provide we're in charge of this investigation. We need just in case if he's the perp, right? They're an investigative body.
Yeah, I guess they're not playing judge, jury, and executioner to the same extent that Alexander likes to.
Yeah.
And ultimately, among themselves, they have that phenomenal amount of trust that they have their allies who they know they can fall back on, who they know that they can extend that trust to, whereas Alexander really has nobody, right? He's, even his close inner circle that he had built up around himself, brought them in to work at his school, he ends up deciding, no, I'm going to destroy them as well.
If you don't mind a bit of tinfoil hatting, there was also
we never do.
another small aspect of that comic that only really comes to light later.
Yes, please.
Rie directly mentioned that he is to inherit the Bellinger Circle.
I wonder if he will. I guess. Like, well,
And
sorry.
what's
I
the
wonder if he
fallout of that?
has. Because
Yeah.
Alexander's death's going to be a secret for a little bit, is the impression
Yes.
we get at the end of 7.x.
What's there left to inherit?
Yeah.
I was about to say that. Yeah, exactly. Like all the apprentices, like more or less left. It's just Wyatt, and like he's gonna be busy with all the, work he's already doing. So like, what's the difference here?
Well, he seemed like a better person than Alex.
Yes.
So that's something. Like he
He
maybe
hasn't-
he's not a great person, but like next to Alex, he was the one being like, "Can we not?" Just like a little bit in that Borrowed Eyes comic. So
Yeah.
I have a little bit of hope for the circle.
I thought he'd be like Alex, but like maybe it's the comparison kind of thing. But like he seemed like at least somewhat reasonable, right? He's just trying to work.
Possibly he'd already seen Alexander's downfall. I was, getting ready to.
Oh, we're really tinfoil hatting
A
now.
party to it, right? Like, I don't know.
Secretly is handshaking with John, giving him the tip off of where he'll be. No.
Honestly, he'd benefit, right? Like, he's head of the family. He gets the business. He doesn't have someone looking over his shoulder. Like, I can see it.
Oh god, it's the classic Sith maneuver.
Look, none of his other apprentices were going to do it. Someone had to.
Yeah, I think didn't Y. This is going way back to like 2.z. Doesn't Y have a girlfriend? Which
that he was
like,
Skyping with, isn't that right?
Yeah,
Or is that someone
which isn't
else?
like a huge thing because plenty of terrible people can have girlfriends. So I'm just comparing him to Alex, Mr. like solo flyer who can't
Mr.
like make
Heartbreaker.
friends with people enough to get a girlfriend. Again, just that little shred of hope that Wyatt maybe actually has a healthy relationship. And
having said that, Elliot, we've seen Kevin and his girlfriend.
No, exactly,
So I wouldn't invest too much stock in that.
it's
a
not
rough
a silver
comparison.
bullet, but maybe.
I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Someone has to. Alex sure can't.
Speaking of Kevin and Ray, I feel like these four these, Bristow's tenants that he brought are not as fun as the last lot we got.
Very.
Like,
I wonder why.
They're very entertaining to read, and they're delightful antagonists, but they're just not very nice people, I suppose.
Bristow really sent like the non-combative ones to Kennet, and they just like they already took down half the wards around the town, and then like these ones,
just beelining their way to the softest parts they can stab.
These are the aware varsity line.
The big guns.
Yeah.
Now, to be fair, Sharon was a member of the ones who went to Kent.
True.
So if you're sort of thinking about the average amount of niceness,
okay,
it does kind of undo Clem.
Balance the scales. Yeah, I had just erased her from my memory, but
I think we all did kind of.
Shelley, kills people or whatever, but like Sharon,
Sharon.
Sharon is the worst.
She doesn't spread misinformation online for money.
Sharon reappeared as well. Kevin called her.
Yeah.
That was very cool.
That was a very neat trick. I didn't think Kevin actually does have like some of that like human resources kind of talent that Bristow does.
Yeah. Just pointing the phone at the door and like using that was very, very cool.
Just neutralizes his domain.
Kevin feels like he would be the antagonist of like if you were gonna do a series about what happens at Sergeant Hall now that Bristow's gone, Kevin feels like he could be the antagonist of that, someone who's trying to take over and replace Bristow.
Do you guys think he will? I mean, he kind of saw himself as Bristow's apprentice, so it's probably better time for him to try and step up than now.
God. I want this to happen now. I really need it.
I feel like the prophecy around Ray is really interesting there as well, in terms of
it's setting up so much for the quote unquote spin-off.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, Ray, just hurry up.
Yeah, get to it, Ray.
Well, not too fast. We're not going to get the sequel that way.
True.
It does beg the question, though, who is to continue the Bristow line? Because he has a niece, he has Kevin, he has all sorts of people around him.
I don't think it's going to be Ted.
No. Ted is very much out of that game.
Because Ted's out of the picture, and Ray and Kevin are off somewhere. So they're still in place, probably. But it's, until there's a third party, it's between those two.
Or do you think it'll be something like Clem kind of setting up a I don't know the right word for it, like a council of tenants that manages the building and operations.
Oh,
Some sort of homeowners association, or
Yeah,
sort of
exactly. That's what it's
homeowners
called.
association. Oh
Yeah.
no,
The worst type of council.
the worst type of council.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder. I mean, I could see Kevin trying to make a claim over the apartment building. But I don't want that because obviously that would suck for everybody involved.
yeah,
I see Kevin falling off the apartment building.
or being pushed.
Mm.
Very possible.
Very possible.
So what else do we want to reflect on from this arc?
I actually liked Shelley near the end.
Yeah,
Her characters got very interesting in the downtime.
Mm.
Yeah,
absolutely. Like huge fan of the fairy just in general.
of course.
I think she was the one where we saw clearest the difference between her under Bristow's influence and then after Bristow was taken out of the picture, how she not like mellowed out completely exactly, but she she had a sort of turnaround where she was like, I've been, gunning in this particular direction for so long that's really not what I want or what I, that's not my deal, because Bristow's been, dragging me along.
Yeah, I think she was so interesting because we saw that one snippet of her memories when she jumped into the
I
ruins.
loved it so much.
That was so brutal to see.
The first person glimpse into the court of Brightfall, the trading and winks and sighs, and I loved all of it. And then they took this beautiful Christmas ornament of a memory and then smashed it with the tragedy of her running into her brother.
Yeah. Well, it was like, and that was back because we always knew that she was like a regular human who had been twisted into what she was today. And to sort of get the reminder halfway through fighting her of like, this is what she was like when she was a person.
Yeah,
She used to give a shit about stuff.
Yeah. And like I definitely got the vibe that that guy who ran the shop must have
Basil?
betrayed her at some point. Just because she just doesn't trust anyone anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know, but like, yeah, it was kind of heartbreaking, and as much as it was like fascinating to see the fairy courts like in person.
The way they say goodbye to one another. I just looked it up preparing for the episode, but where he says, "Be well, Shelley. Be sane. Be safe. Be whole," and she replies, "You too. Try." And just neither of them succeed. By the time we see them, they're so far from safe, sane, or whole. Either individually or as a pair. It's just, yeah.
I love like the ruins as like a narrative device because it's not just like, oh, it's the audience gets to see it, but like the trio gets to see it too, and like Avery's feeling sorry about it, and like Shelley doesn't want the pity, but it's a sad story.
Pocket
Also,
tragic backstory.
Because I get the impression, and I'd have to go back and like double check this, but the first time they went in, I got the impression Jessica was saying that you are giving these memories to the ruins a bit. Like you maybe still have it, but it would like drain some of your emotional connection to it. Like that's what you're paying. So it's like there's this extra layer of tragedy whenever someone's viewing one of these important memories where they're sort of giving up a bit of like, that's Shelley giving up that attachment to a memory of her, connecting with Daniel and the shopkeeper guy.
It gets a little bit less important.
Yeah. Like, because I think we see it's the same chapter, I think, where Verona does it, and it's like a memory of her when she finds out her parents are getting divorced. And I was just like, oh, God, I could go either way on whether it's a good or a bad thing you're giving up. Because that seems like a real painful memory, but also maybe the important kind of pain.
Yeah, like, it helps you because Verona wouldn't be the person she is without like that experience. Right. So maybe this is like the kind of like experience you don't want to give up because it's integral to your character, or it's what helped you become the person you are now.
Yeah. I feel there's a sense that part of that losing direct connection to it is that you sort of have to face up to it again, that you re-encounter it, you relive it, and you'll reprocess it in a new context. I think there was when they were traveling through the ruins the first time, there was a sense where they gave up that echo and then chased it down and found it at the other end, right? That it was the thing that was dragging them forwards. So I wonder whether the sort of intended path, if you're going through the ruins, is to find one of these memories, recontextualize it, face it again in a new space where you're not losing it as in you had it and it's gone, but the emotional moment it had for you, you put into a new context and it doesn't have that sting that it had before, or it doesn't have that shine that it had before. But when you're going into the ruins without a plan of going anywhere else, when it's just, I'm punching my way through, and you don't chase that echo down again, I wonder whether that's where you go, I've had to bring this up again in a new context. I haven't had a chance to, really deal with it. I'm, straight back into fighting off brownies and, bright-eyed and all sorts of things. And yeah, that's a situation where you don't have a chance to go back over that, and you just sort of, lose your grip on it a bit.
I like that context. It makes the ruin trips a lot less, every time you go, you lose a little bit, a piece of yourself. I like that one a lot more because it implies some sort of like character growth from like these flashback episodes.
And I suppose that's what the ruins is, right? Like I'm thinking way back to, again, Arc 2. The ruins was like listed as like where emotions go to get recycled.
Yeah.
I thought it was where emotions go to die.
Well, I mean, little column A, little column B.
So what else do we want to reflect on from this arc?
There was the Oni conversation.
Which we've been waiting for a while.
God, yes.
I had forgotten that was part of this arc. It's so long ago, but absolutely, it was.
Yes.
It was near the front.
Yeah, I mean, it had been built up for a while, and we got this conversation, but that doesn't feel like the resolution of this Oni element, right? Which I had assumed was kind of going to be part of the BHI resolution, but it wasn't really.
No.
So does that imply that Oni is going to have something to do with the end of the, the Calm Abyss murder stuff, or whatever we come into next?
I think it's meant to just be a distant mirror. Like, this is very similar, but this is also a historical event that's still very messy and was very messy, and there's no real resolution to it.
Yeah, I mean, there are similarities between what's happening with like Kenneth and Mrs. Plan and the Oni, so maybe there'll be like more comparisons to draw as that does or doesn't go well. But yeah, I feel like it'll come in again just for like another comparison, but it was just so good to see it. Like we kept getting the bait and switch with the Oni stuff. It was like just when somebody was about to tell us something would come up, and I was about to lose my mind. I was so proud of Verona for throwing the same tantrum I was doing in my life.
Absolutely. I think I think those of us who've been sort of playing packed dice for a little while, Oni's been sitting in that table of schools that are, a practitioner can be part of, and we've had little snippets dropped here and there. And this is, the first time we've really got the meat and potatoes of what actually went down there. And that was, very, very satisfying to get after a long wait.
Because it's like the reasons and cause of the Oni War. It's like, it's all about practitioner and other relationships. And like, that's like the core theme of Pale. I'm hoping we at least like see more like of this like theme like run through the future arcs. Because I think it has like at least more parallels to give for the crew.
Yeah. I think there's probably going to be some more conversations where at least they touch on the idea of what other systems are there or have there been or have people experimented with Bristow being one example, obviously, but I think the Oni will have to come up as another one.
Yeah, I think for me it stands out as, directly leading on from the, stuff we got from Miss last arc about, or the arc before, I can't remember, but the stuff about the way that the balance between practitioners and others is very much in flux, that it was meant to be one way, apparently, as Solomon laid it out, but it's, not exactly landing on that. And the Oni come up as a situation where others tried to assert some degree of self-determination and freedom, and the practitioners were very practitionary about it. They sort of trod on them. They, decided that that was unacceptable behavior. And then from then, they were seen as the heroes. The discussion from Corbin, the kid who and there was some very heated discussion at the time in the Discords and such, but where some of what he was saying was relatively reasonable. War isn't great, but to then go, so the practitioners were right in everything they did and the others were totally wrong, was not ideal. And I think that it's sort of set up for this arc in general, where you see how do practitioners run things when they get to be practitioners at one another. That Bristow and Alexander are both these figures who are very well established in the practitioner community. They're well respected worldwide, and we see how they operate. Right? They stab each other. They do insidious little things to gain claims over one another. And they totally trample over everything in between them and their goals. Right? I feel like if the entire story is setting up, as Miss thinks it might be, what does this potential new dynamic look like, right? What's a way that we can go forward? This chapter, just seeing how Bristow and Alexander go about things and what the results of that are, was a good sign to no, practitioners being in control is not a good solution. That's not a way that we get out of this cleanly.
I think I'd have been a bit more amenable to his resolution if, first of all, some of the actual requirements were kind of just a little bit insane. And then maybe if we had a co-council of practitioners and others, maybe I'll start coming around. But the whole deal was kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think they hit the nail on the head when they asked, so does he believe in this enough to maybe not be personally in charge of all of it?
Yeah.
And Nicolette was like, well...
yeah, it's Bristow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of how good a system is, if one person is demanding to be at the seat of absolute power within it, I think inherently it's not going to work.
Especially Bristow is someone who didn't have any succession plans for himself. And I think some people brought this up when we sort of ran it as a discussion question. It was like, he doesn't have a succession plan for just himself, and now he wants to be, Grand Master of the region. And there was no talk of who could replace him. Even if we're gonna entertain the idea that he's the tyrant we need today, there's no talk of who's next.
And I think that segues nicely into Ted's take on the whole thing, because Ted's been this figure who, again, much controversy about him, sort of in the lead up to this and during it, about is he genuinely a good hero guy? Is he totally being led around with their nose by Bristow? And this chapter, he sort of, meanders around that, where he gives that speech about, well, yes, Bristow is a tyrant, and yes, he's not currently a hero, but maybe his actions are good enough that we could get him the right motivations at some point down the road. It's just such a fascinating take on things from an individual who, has that experience of greater powers trading on him to get him to do what he wants, and he so easily folds under that when Bristow's calling the shots for him. I think Ted's a fascinating character.
I think Ted's just old. He's old. He's done a bunch of crap. He hasn't died yet, and he's just dealing. It's fascinating to see.
I think he started to make sense to me right at the end of the arc, when he leaves his freedom is so much. He says, it's something like...
I don't like freedom, Ted answers. So much bigger than the life I used to live.
Yes. And it's sort of that's why you can see, he was desperate, I think, to have someone like Bristow in charge, because he'd lived, tens, hundreds of thousands of years with this sort of singular purpose. And the idea of not having that, not having this mission we need to work towards for someone, was just terrifying to him. So, with a bit of help from Bristow, once he was under his wing, he sort of convinced himself that this is what they needed.
And he does have just a bit of an idealistic core, right? Because when Alexander offers him, hey, I'm going to threaten you into undoing yourself and or swearing yourself to me, and or I'm going to spring this trap on you or some other poor unsuspecting person, he has the moral fiber left to go, and I'm not going to help you. Even if that's the risk for me or for someone else, I'm not going to, take that, evil practitioner bait. And I think he genuinely does believe in the future that Bristow's selling, right? Even if he doesn't believe that the current Bristow's the guy to do the job, I think he genuinely does hope for a world where people can be protected from the biggest threats. It's just that, he's been so ground down into taking that ideal and then finding somebody who'll tell him, yes, this is what I'm working towards. Now do X, Y, and Z that looks entirely opposite of that, and he'll buy it.
because at least we get the idea that like the threat is like somewhat credible, right? Because like Nicolette was like talking about like how all these systems are like so old, they're like based off like word of mouth and not like there's no like real accountability of like who's doing what and who's trying to protect what areas, right? So like I can see like the reasoning for it, but like I'm not sure if Bristo's the person to do it. I feel like that's like Ted's like, he at least someone will be in charge. I think that's
Yeah.
his mindset.
Yeah, I agree.
And for him to say, I'm sure he's got a hero inside him. When Ted himself has gone through the experience of it can take 600,000 lifetimes to get to that hero. Sure, maybe it's buried in there somewhere, but that doesn't mean you're going to get it straight away. Or within
Not in this lifetime.
Exactly.
I know like Ted's probably gone from the story, but I wish we could see more of him. The idea of like an awakened Ted was even under an Alexander, like that'd still be amazing to see.
I want him. Yeah, I want. Everyone's been so scared of Ted the entire time. I want to see him let loose.
We got a little scuffle with Ulysses, in Kevin's interlude.
That was so whack.
Where he was like monologuing as he almost but not quite actually dodged this fire gauntlet mace thing, and was narrating to him, yes, I've met you and defeated you multiple times. Like it's just, just delightful stuff.
In one timeline, I've met your god before you did. But for other reasons. He was flexing hard. That was amazing. Because like, what other like characters in the story has he like within these timelines like met and like fought already?
I don't know. I kind of want to see him get punched.
Well, Alex tries that.
Because he's like he's not in his time loop anymore. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
I mean, there was that one time John kind of drew him to a draw by blowing them both up, much to Lucy's chagrin.
Stop sacrificing yourself.
Oh man.
I'm not sure how much I want to blame it on the good karma, but it does seem very coincidental that like right when Ted has to deal with Alex, and Alex is like, he's going all out just this once. John comes in from nowhere, and I, maybe a little bit karmic, maybe. I think that because like his like generations of like good karma is like a big factor of like why Ted is so successful with everything he does, and like everything like seems to go his way, or at least mostly.
Yeah, I mean that's what was kind of fascinating about Ted is like he was by design someone who had just an absolute buttload of power, but was kind of to his own design ill-equipped to use it. Like he could, just say no and make the brownies go away, and that's obviously awesome. But like, he could do so much more, and he kind of avoided being able to do that.
Yeah, that bit where he revealed, I want to stay as far away from the practice as possible. I've already seen too much. That he wants to make as little of himself as possible for this man who's, just like, physically powerful, karmically, a juggernaut. He's just the desire to go. I suppose it sort of ties back to some of the stuff Charles has been saying about, hey, maybe this stuff isn't something you actually want to be going into.
Maybe this might be a bit controversial to say. Maybe the practice isn't the solution.
What? I don't believe it.
Right.
That's a hard argument to make when someone's about to spill their blood and turn the world upside down. I mean that jokingly, of course.
Of course.
So what else stood out to everybody from this chapter?
So on a bit of a personal note, as we said at the start of the episode, the three of us are some of the players from Mile End, and there was the particular moment in this arc that gave me the most Mile End vibes was when Verona, Lucy, and America were tied up under this music box with these dancing dolls. Just to start with, just an awesome scene, right?
Yes.
This item that's having this horrific effect over their lives, and Talia there just being like, "Oh yeah, my mum used this to like tell me not to watch TV for too long, otherwise she'd subject me to this. My familia also hated it because she danced." And Talia's in that going, "Oh yeah, but my mum's not a bad mum. She feeds me, she gives me opportunities. oh, it's just that whenever this music comes on, I want to cry, and I don't really get it. That combination of children in the shadow of their parents, this magical item that's having this sort of vast effect on people, and the unlikely ally of America Ted, just like being there and being awful, but also being what they needed. There's very, very strong Mile End vibes for me.
I agree with the Mile End vibes. I particularly like that season because like that scene because it has we get to see like the Bristow faction and like pretty much most of the Bristow characters in that scene besides Estrella. I really like Estrella. Everyone else was just kind of like bumbling around. Like Estrella basically did a rest under the bus because they weren't doing their jobs.
She was carrying them pretty hard there. That also gave me real Pact Dice vibes because that's another situation where you get these characters who have all of these different practices crammed in the small room.
And
they have, yeah.
They're like trying to like cover like all these like different avenues. Like they're like, oh, watch out for gates. Oh, this Oni mage just threw knives, and now the shadows are like stabbing Hennigar, and like, oh, there's goblins running around a soccer field. Like there's so many different like things to take account of, like so many different practices. We have like the one guy in the background, like, oh, I have this cool, thermos. Just like, just give me a moment. I bet the thermos have been really based, but he just never got a chance to use it, and he didn't want to do anything else either.
Yeah,
I think this is like a good like, well, not like a good like analogy, but like I think this may like sneak peek at like if this is the people like under Bristow's faction, like is this like the kind of efficacy we would expect to see in like his new system? Like,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't like impress me. Like, oh, this is like the change that like the region needs.
It didn't feel like an increase in unity. It just felt like an increase in proximity.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, like because their loyalty to him just wasn't there, right? When the tables started to turn, they were like, yeah, okay, we fold. Because they didn't have stakes there. Bristow's built this, network of practitioners that he's sort of bringing into his control, but not actually connecting with them, right? He's not actually like inspiring people. He's not, befriending anybody. He's just expecting them to follow behind him because he set things up to fall down the right way. But when it comes down to it, the genuine friendships that the Kennet trio are able to establish with people like Clem, people like Nicolette, that's what pulls them through.
I love that like the power of friendship came into play, and it wasn't amazingly cheesy. I really liked how like friendship was like the key to winning in like half of these fight scenes.
But it felt so deserved. Like it never felt like corny, like heart of the cards bullshit from like an anime or something. It actually felt like they put in the work and they did better than everyone else with treating them like people, and that was why they were rewarded. Whereas like Estrella, it was like the second thing started to turn, she was like, I'd rather get stabbed in the boob than actually try.
And Alexander's demise as just this perfect moment of, I've literally just looked into the past, seen myself giving the advice to this room full of people about, hey, maybe we should stick together, we should look after one another, because when we're alone, that's when we're at our weakest. And we jump to the present, he's sitting alone in his car in the dark, he's literally plotting the downfall of two of the people in that room who he hasn't already plotted the downfall of. And that's when the terrible thing happens to him.
Ends.
Exactly.
That's so good.
It's a sad ending because like the founders were, everyone's together, they're all hanging out, and then we just like that scene contrast is sad. Like 20 years from now,
they weren't great back then either.
They weren't great back then. But at least they had each other.
Yeah.
-1. With that woman leaving.
Louisa. Big props to her. She had the right of it. Just get out of there.
The only good practitioner.
It was so funny because you start reading it and you're like, oh, why haven't we heard of Louisa? Is she dead or something that keeps going on? It's like, oh, we haven't heard of her because she just fucking left these in.
Yeah.
Because she's smart.
Oh my gosh, she's like the most sensible of all of them. And she's like a big practitioner too. She went in as well. It's not like with like Charles where like, we expect him to be reasonable. He's not like too ahead. He's sitting outside, but like she went inside too. I want to see like what she's been doing in like the however many decades since.
She's killed the Carmine Beast.
I think it is.
What a twist.
Either her husband or another crow who's set up as one of the potential headmasters for the BHI. So if we're hoping for more stories in this path, I think she's either. She's
So here's the issue. They were talking about like one of the teachers was like this scourge that like, sends out boogeymen to like keep them sharp. And we haven't seen the crows. So like that can't be the same one, but like it feels like we've seen all the teachers already. So like I don't know what's going on. Who are the crows? What are they doing?
I think some of them are guest teachers who aren't on campus. So maybe the crows are just... One of the things Louisa says in this flashback is, I like to stay out of trouble. So she's probably just kept her whole family away this summer.
Smart. This isn't like the full freshman class either, so I guess that does follow. Because like I'm assuming like other teachers would come in like during the fall for the main semester.
Also, in fairness, there's been a lot of characters in this arc. It's been a bit... It's been a bit hectic to keep up with them all. Had to have that little brochure on the second tab.
Yep.
Yeah, just for like recurring usefulness.
Yep.
The student guide is absolutely the best extra material. Like,
MVP.
For that access alone, I'm just like, wait, it's so good.
That one, I almost don't want it to be extra material because like it's so... I don't know how you would read this and like not like, oh, I get to go back, I get to see their practices. Oh, they're in the same rooms. I guess they're friends.
You know how it's like fantasy books always include like the map of the fantasy world at the start? Yeah. If Pale gets published, it just needs to have the student guide.
Yeah, absolutely.
In the first few pages.
And
like
for the
special...
first 4 arcs, everyone's going to be like, what
Who the hell are these people?
Who are all these characters that I haven't met?
You could just start with a note. It's like, come back here in Arc 4.
Come back here in Arc 5.
So now that the BHI stuff has more or less wrapped up, I'm curious to see what everyone thinks the ramifications of this are going to be.
Yeah.
What's going to happen next?
War. Or something bad. I don't see it going well.
So you think things are going to get worse as a result?
Very interesting.
Things are tense. People are hurt.
Sounds very calming to me. Very calming.
Yeah, you gotta wonder that possibly until this judge who's meant to preside over violence and injustice and justice, whether until they're restored, can there be a real resolution to this fight?
And there really hasn't been a proper resolution for most people involved in it, besides one person they know of dying and a second person secretly dying. There's still tension, still emotions, still anger.
I'm thinking, I know it's been said, but I'm really supporting this theory that the Carmine Beast plotline isn't going to wait for them to finish school. I really hope that like they continue school here and the Carmine Beast plotline just kind of crashes into this. And that way we get to keep all the BHI stuff and finish up with the Carmine stuff. Because it doesn't feel like we're like, we're not packing up and like getting ready to leave for it doesn't feel like that so far.
It certainly things haven't settled out there. I think to some degree, if they do end up going back to Kennet, you'll get there's a sense now that every practitioner in the local area has bigger things to worry about than what's going on in the sleepy little town. That, the individuals who had been poking their noses in are now dead or gone. And anyone else who might be interested in has, other things to
sworn off.
I think when it comes to the actual deal of whodunit, the mystery, if we bring that back into the center of focus, I think external practitioners have just been diminished by this war to the point that I don't think they're necessarily in the running now.
Or is it the perfect time for some of them to rock up when they hear it's happening and try to take it? Like if you hear somebody's donning the carmine furs and it's sort of like they're not established yet, you can come in and nick them.
If DeRocher hears that there's untamed power nearby in a sleepy little town, is she gonna come knocking? I want to see more DeRocher right now. Like we have a sort of arc with Alex. We have a sort of arc with Ray. I'm waiting for the DeRocher arc, and it's kind of... I'm not ruling it out.
Field trip to was it the Netherlands?
Yeah.
You can go visit her monster there.
Oh yeah,
just for a whole arc.
Just go hold your breath at a peat bog for 3 to 4 minutes, and then you'll be dropped into the pit with the monster.
Oh god, how is that even going to work out? Heat bug thing. I'm worried that's gonna just go off randomly later.
I think Alexander had to text them the go ahead
Yeah.
before they were going to do it, and I don't think he did when he was fucking around with Ted. So
I do
think it's safe.
I do love the idea that there's an intern out there somewhere just sitting around waiting for this text.
He's an unpaid intern too. It makes it worse.
Yeah. Someone in debt to the, Paris
Oh, he's
Practitioner
like
Council or whatever.
I love that like DeRoche described it as beautiful. It's like this 45-ton constantly changing plant beast monster. It's like
based off of carrion eaters, right? It's the scavenger one, but pretty.
And it's like when I think of like carrion eaters, I think of like a vulture, right? Like that's I don't. They're really cool birds. I don't know if they're pretty. I don't know if they're beautiful.
I thought what was funny about that is like Ray was like, "Oh, that's probably like the goddess in it," when she said it was beautiful.
Yes.
And I was like, "No, this is Durasha. It could just be the creepy monster part."
It's smooth like a maggot.
I love Durasha. The more I find out, I'm like, I need the character art because we don't really get like a good look at like inside her head, right? Like we don't even get like an actual Durasha's besides like her being quote unquote neutral, like she's just there.
She's pretty scary though. I don't think anyone wants to look inside her head.
I just want to know, how does someone get to that point, right? Even as a younger woman, she's a sort of prowling tiger of a person. How do you be born as a human being and then become that? The person who will eventually be the sort of coiled up, vengeful almost feeling. Very very like the primevals that she deals with in terms of her unstoppable menace. How do you get there?
I mean, we don't know much about her history, right? She seems to me to be the extension of what happens when there's a practitioner who's been a practitioner for literally their entire life, awoken in a practitioner family since she was like 6 or whatever, and has just had so much time to slowly get more and more fucked up. I mean, and she seems to be remarkably doing well, right?
Well adjusted.
Yeah.
Out of all three.
But yeah, possibly her grandparents were, ordinary, decent human beings, and then they've had 3 generations to become Durasha.
It's also likely that for every one Durasher out there, there's like 50 dead bodies of wannabe Durashers.
True. Just survivorship bias.
Survivorship bias very heavily. And I feel like a lot of those 50 dead wannabes, I feel like a lot of them are going to start out like, I'm going to bring up like the parallel to the 3 founders to the trio again. I feel like a young Durasha, or at least like how she started, would have been a lot like Verona with like how like their intensity of the practice.
Yeah, she doesn't strike me as someone who dabbled first and then she didn't take the baby steps. She dove in head first. The what was meant to be a scouting mission. Yeah, we just decided to go in and face the primeval. Because we got bored.
Reminds me a bit of like what Verona actually could have been like without her friends tampering her
exactly.
wants to dive away from humanity. Like I could totally see Verona just diving headfirst into some primeval den.
Yeah.
And relying on her quick wit to survive and sort of getting reputation out of that.
There's also a key difference in that Verona kind of focuses on herself and changing herself. I get the feeling Durasha is more about, there's a monster, I want to see what its guts look like.
We kind of see it here, like some of her mindset in like the Binding chapter, right? And like a lot of it's like, oh, we need to dominate these others and nail their feet to the floor. And I wasn't expecting that. That was kind of wild.
The other side of that was she also talked about how like being stuck in a conversation is a type of binding. Like she viewed humanity or human society as a bit of a binding, and she was like, because I think I always find her and Ray fascinating because they're kind of both out of the main conflict for different reasons. Like Ray sticks his head in computers and is like, trying to remain neutral to maintain his business or whatever, whereas Durasha is just kind of disconnected from that part of humanity. She stays involved with the school, I think, to keep her humanity kindling, but mostly she's just kind of like happy to leave humanity bullshit behind, and that includes civil wars or whatnot.
Yeah, I get the idea that possibly if Verona, instead of going, I want to get out of here, went, I need to bend Brett to my will, that's how Dorothea could have come into being.
God, yes.
Wowza.
The scariest primeval.
Yeah.
I'm really invested in like seeing like what Verona turns out to be, because like it's been 7 arcs. I'm not sure if we have a straw. Do you have any theories at the moment? Any predictions? Do you want to make now? Because
it's been the hot topic of conversation again. The Pack Dice people have sort of a list of schools that we draw on, and it's not conclusive. But from the start we've been like, okay, where's Avery going? Where's Lucy going? And we found that Avery's becoming a finder, and we were like, yes, okay, that one's ticked off. But Verona's been the biggest floating mystery. My most recent theory in discussing this is that just based on who Verona is, she's not going to accept a practice that somebody teaches her. Instead, she's going to collate a bunch of information, throw herself into a problem that's maybe too big for her to solve, and then create something new for herself. I think back to her very first practice being throwing her hat and doing the boomerang thing, and everyone being about it. They did teach us how to do that. And she's like, yeah, but I made it work.
But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Exactly. I think about how she hates the idea of becoming her father or becoming her mother or becoming like Bristow or Alexander. My instinct is that she's going to see a bunch of paths available for her and reject them all and choose her own path. Same with like her hair and her clothing and stuff, right? It's got to be something that's uniquely her.
I am a fan of this theory.
My own personal theory isn't super different. Like I've just been kind of working on the assumption at this point. Maybe she just won't specialize. Like maybe the concept that you have to specialize and belong to a particular branch of the practice is just something that she won't have to abide by. Because it's very much like a traditional idea, and that the Kenneteers are all about getting rid of that shit. So maybe she just won't, and not just be a dabbler or whatever they've called her, but just
the advanced
her own
version.
thing.
The advanced version.
I like that as well, just given the emphasis on the story of rejecting labels, whether it's Miss, who's avoiding them like the plague, or the goblins who are doing goblin nonsense, but like specifically Gashwad, who's like, no, I don't want to be this one thing that you keep telling me. I'm going to do this thing even if I'm worse at it. And then all of the others who are not quite what the practitioners make them out to be. Alpi in particular, right? Who they think, is she a night hag? Is maybe the closest thing we've got, but that definitely doesn't fit. I think the idea of her going, I'm not going to let the universe paint me into one corner. I like a lot.
I have a particularly boring theory about it. I figure that this whole series seems to be taking place in a relatively short window of time, and the practice of others seems to be something developed over one's lifetime, over the path one takes through the years. I don't know if we'll see even all of them develop towards a specific practice in the time the story has. And that's okay.
Yeah.
That's okay. But do you know why it's okay? It's going to be okay because we're going to see them in the background of some sort of apartment building spin-off where, Clem's trying to take out Kevin, and perhaps she sees, someone who deals with primevals, and they're a young woman, and they're, perhaps, Ray needs a convenient place to hide the body. And, her old friend Verona.
Or, this stranger in a cat mask is just sort of lurking in the corner of the frame. Yeah.
God, just another reason why it'd be really nice to have that, apartment spin-off.
Sad you've jinxed it. We're never getting that.
No!
I'm not on wood.
I'm still secretly hoping my theory that we're all leading up to some Avengers style Otherverse crossover.
Absolutely. 100%.
The characters from Pale, the characters from Pope.
I really want that now.
And Bristow foreshadowed that big things are coming, so.
Yeah.
I will say that I think someone already mentioned it, but like it is a cop out because it's like those vague prophecies where something bad happened. I talked about it with my vague my horoscope, right? If anything bad happens, then
from here on out,
From here on out, then be like, oh, of course, Bristow foretold
his dying words.
Bristow, I suppose what you could do if you're Bristow is pay some dude on the street to call themselves an augur and then get them to say what you want. And then you can go back and be like, well, my augur says.
Oh my lord.
Kind of like, it's basically what the others did with the Kenneteers, right? Like the Kenneteers were awoken.
Ah,
It was
yes,
like,
our
oh, yeah,
practitioners. Yeah.
Someone's definitely
practitioners
doing
are on
that.
the case.
You random stranger, can you legally change your name to Bristow's Augur, please?
Yeah. I'll give you cheap rent.
Oh, you could, if you find someone else called Alexander Belanger, get them to say bad things about other people, and then say Alexander Belanger said this about you.
I
Oh,
wonder
dear.
if that would work. Getting someone to legally change their name to Alexander Belanger and then just start shit talking everything so you can say it.
It's cheap rent. They had to do it.
Yeah.
I'd
cannot
do it.
deny
I'd do
the
it for
power.
cheap rent.
I would change my name for cheap rent.
To Alexander Belanger. Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I feel like comically what would end up happening is you're going to get some of the fallout as well. Like, it's, you could talk all this shit, but then somebody's going to be like, right, I'm going to find this Alexander Belanger and beat the shit out of them, and I'll find your address first.
Yeah, that's like, you're just asking to get all of his enemies.
Yeah, 100%.
Exactly.
Oh, kind of like how, Kevin can ruin someone's day, but it never makes his better.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now that, we were, talking about, what's gonna happen if, the girls in, the trio, what are our thoughts for, after this arc? Not sure if we mentioned this yet. Where the story goes from here, and,
Bad places. Then good places. But first, bad places.
I have to admit, I've read 8.1 and 8.2 already, so I have a bit of an idea, but
I have as well.
we've got to go back to Kennet eventually.
Yeah.
Bad places.
What? What plot lines in Kennet do we still have to take care of?
Brett's surgery.
Brett's
Ugh.
surgery.
Don't remind
Avery
me.
coming out to her
Avery.
parents.
Yeah.
There's some Carmine Beast stuff going on too, I
Carmine
think.
stuff.
Oh, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
We'll get to see more Tashlit.
That's
Oh,
true.
yes. Okay, yeah. We're going back.
And Sig.
So we haven't actually
Sig.
seen, Sig in a... Okay, we might need to go back, I guess. I've been convinced.
Sig interlude when.
Yeah.
He has this alien intelligence. We're gonna be surprised by just how... I've seen Bo's xenofiction. He can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be excited for it.
Tashlit's fun.
Yeah, very much. I think we got to see her come into her own here with, doing the water protection stuff.
Yes.
The moment where she couldn't heal Layla. That was tragic. But she's just great to have around because she's doesn't have a lot of dialogue, by which we mean she jiggles her eyes occasionally. But she just has so much personality that she brings to every scene she's in.
Not to mention, it's really nice to see Verona really vibe with someone, and it's not the half-assed kind of oh, Alpi, she's nightmares in darkness, but it's she genuinely gets this person in a way that a lot of the other trio doesn't really understand, or even most others, because Alpi sure didn't understand Tashlet, and she was seeing her dreams.
Yeah. I think something about the sort of sleek, dark inner self with this sort of baggy skin draped over it resonates with her. That, living a life that has been sort of forced on you.
Considering, Verona's, sight, it really, matches, because, she clearly has a very unique aesthetic that she doesn't realize is whack at all.
Yeah.
I think that's what Verona's superpower really is just that way she doesn't judge books by their covers.
Mm-hmm.
She will kind of let you behave poorly before she judges you. So she can meet someone like Tashlit, and everyone else is giving Tashlit a 10-foot wide berth, and Verona just goes up and borrows her shirt and is waiting for her to do something wrong before she judges her, and it's just so awesome.
She looks, underneath the skin, right?
Exactly. And the eyeballs.
Exactly. The site gave her these, meaty, flappy things to talk to as her site. The first thing was actually, hey, here's some people that you could connect to. Lucy and Avery aren't, speaking to their swords or, camera ribbons or whatever. It's someone to reach out to. And admittedly, not human someone's, but I think Verona is shockingly empathetic for someone who is so, in her own sense, emotionally deadened and wanting to disconnect from humanity.
I don't know. I think she does kind of judge books by their cover. She's just really into the Necronomicon and such. That's just her vibe.
And to add a Necronomicon bits, we don't. So Tashlet, when Verona was asking, oh, you don't eat babies, do you? Tashlet gave a really not confident instilling and we do have to go to Kenneth just to see what exactly sort of baby eating she does. Because I don't. Because they're powered by a god, so I don't know why you would need to power yourself in this way, a lot of the others we see, right? You don't need to eat any children. You have a god powering you, so I'm not sure what exactly is happening with Tashlet.
She's just chilling in the river,
chilling in the river
outside the fairy cave.
Maybe
having
it's
a good time.
Maybe it's fish babies.
Hey, you eat chicken
caviar.
eggs, don't you? Yeah. Have you ever eaten lamb, you baby eater?
Hopefully.
That's a good point.
I'll take that. Lamb is like a religious sort of meal, kind of. Maybe it's that kind of baby eating.
That does lead us to another point, though, because we saw Verona and Tashlet develop their relationship. We saw the usual Avery and Snowdrop developing a relationship. And to round out the trio, we saw Lucy and John develop their relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really like the Alexander's Curse. We didn't have to wait so long at all. It came in calling almost immediately, and it was even punctuated right at the moment where Lucy decides not to take him as a familiar, she smells acid and ink. I wonder why.
I will propose a question though, which is it a bad thing that Lucy will not be taking John as her familiar anymore?
This might be a bit controversial, but Lucy has said she's not not necessarily, she doesn't like fighting, right? So it does seem a little bit out of place to be oh, I don't like fighting, but I'm going to take this animus whose existence was based off of fighting in wars. So it did seem kind of a mismatch of in terms of what she wanted and what John had to provide.
See, I always saw him as someone who's born into war, right, into a conflict that he didn't choose, that he didn't, have a say in ultimately, and who chose to leave, right? He's not still hanging around the Middle East, killing other soldiers. He found Kennet as this place where he could try to escape that, and use what he learned in that to help the community that he's in. Admittedly, by shooting ghouls and boogeymen and things, but I think and that I very much resonated with Lucy, where she's caught up in history in a lot of ways, and though she knows how to fight that fight, it's a fight she doesn't want to. So I saw that as an opportunity that's now being closed off. And I think any time a door closes, that's a bit sad. I think it wasn't like she was predestined to choose him before. It was just that he was there as a choice, and now he's very much not.
Now he's
and
not.
That's sad. And also, he's probably going to die by the end of summer. So
don't say that. You're gonna jinx it. God, because John, he has some they keep telling him not to sacrifice himself.
Yeah,
they really. I know, there's this reason, oh, they keep saying it's gonna happen, but it's gonna make me really upsetting because John kind of is okay with that, and I want him to be not okay with that. I want him to have a will to live.
Big same. I want that to be his big triumphant moment of his own when he gets asked to be the Carmine dog, and he just says
no. I have shit to do. I have kids to take care of.
Yeah, I can't take that responsibility for you.
God, yes. I need him to say no.
You presume they'll let him say no.
No.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Well, it's the thought that counts. It's a thought that counts. It's the character development I'm looking for.
Okay, so to go full tinfoil, which is, the point of the show.
Yes.
He's been just so keen to get himself sacrificed recently that I've been wondering, because, one of the first things we learnt about him as a dog of war is that if you put him down, he will come back again. To the point that I'm is there something that he's bound not to say, or, is he trying to get him killed off in some way so he can come back and then do something new? That, either...
Ooh!
So, the idea of that being one of his first things that was told about him, and then sometime towards the conflict, possibly the Kenneteers have to kill him, or something happens that he dies, and then he gets to come back and reveal, this is why I had really wanted to die, because now I get to do X, Y, and Z.
It's kind of like some sort of like a shed skin effect. He's going to cleanse status effect. Ooh.
He's had memories that were stolen or something that he gets to come back and reclaim. I don't know.
I'm as a tinfoil hat theory, I'm kind of digging it. I prefer that over like, John just has like really like low self-worth and like...
Yeah. Which, to be fair, seems more likely, but...
It seems more likely, but I don't want it to be the case.
Exactly.
Or if it is the case, I want him to get over it, and then he lives in the happily ever after. He gets to occasionally talk to Yalda somehow. I don't know. Maybe Bree can visit, and like after she's like taking control, and like she'll like send Yalda out. She can pull the kids out. I'm sure like at some point she can like figure it out if she like manages to like become this vessel for the power.
I think he's gonna die.
Yeah. I mean, that's the point of tinfoil, right? It's not particularly sturdy, but it's shiny. So even if the whole concept is totally flawed, I like the gleam of it.
Yes, it's a great way of putting it.
And in that 1 in a million chance you end up being right, you get to act like you were a genius.
If you're wrong, you're crazy. Everyone expected it, but if you're right, you're a legend. Yes. What? Now we're talking about tinfoil hat theories. Does anyone have anything particularly crazy they want to mention after this this arc?
Well, I was just going to say, again, it's gotten to the point of this story where there are obviously threads that are dangling, but I don't feel like I can look at the story and where it is and say, oh, I know what's going to happen next. Like, I think there's probably about a 75% chance that we go back to Kennet and resolve the Carmine Beast thing. But then there's like a 25% chance that Bo's just gotten attached to the Blue Heron Institute. There's still a few stories left to tell, so we stick around there a bit. Like,
God, yes.
I feel like I can guess where we're going next, but there's no... It's still so indefinite, I guess is the word.
Right.
How's this for a theory? Kenneteers, they're about to head back to Kennet, but what's this? Oh no, it's some sort of time bubble, and they're stuck in there for 2 years now. So we're just going to go over to Sergeant Hall for a bit and cleanse
for 2
down
years.
the antagonist.
They pull a mini Ted.
Oh no.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a part of me that wants, that wants them to like go on their field trip to the fairy courts and, what's this? Marisica's mum's here, and then like you get to the end of that thread and it's like, oh, now we're going to some other interdimensional space and I want Wildbow to filibuster like 20 more years out of the story because it's just that fun.
Yes, there's so much. Actually, we didn't mention it in terms of like plot lines to resolve, but like Guillerme, he's still like dying, and we haven't talked on however many arcs. Like he has like one story left to live. That's another thing that we have to resolve.
So here's my current big hope for Guillerme is that I went back and reread the chapter where they were interviewing Mariska and Guillerme because fairies, delightful. But specifically, Guillerme says the words, it's not verbatim, but he says that whatever happens as a result of this, whoever supersedes the Carmine Beast will shake things up in the area, could make things interesting. And so my hope is that he was subtly there going, there could be more stories in this. Whatever happens here, there's some hope. And the story, the last story he had left was mentioned to be a mystery. And so my hope is that it's the mystery of the Carmine Beast, and it ends in a way that, spins him off onto grand new adventures for tons of time to come.
Maybe this might be a little bit of a tinfoil hat theory. Maybe the last story he needs to see. This is the third time I'm mentioning this, but perhaps some sort of wacky apartment building, some sort of sitcom where Guillerme's like stuck in the back. He's watching on the cameras. He's like, "Oh wow, that's so wacky!"
And so
Ray's back.
And you've managed to very naturally segue to that 3 times, so now it has to happen.
Rule of 3, it has to happen.
Such natural segues each time.
Bravo should have stopped me on the 3rd time. Bravo lost his chance.
Yeah. I also like the idea that if Guillerme does fall to winter, that doesn't necessarily mean the end of his story with Kennet. the idea that
Yes.
winterized Guillermet, the frozen giant or whatever he becomes, would still hang around in that cave.
Yeah, he's
teaching.
not dead.
Exactly, right? He's winterized, and that's he's not who he was. Except that also he is who he was. Except he's only that now. That if this is the pattern that he gets stuck in, it's not that bad of a pattern. He's a pretty chill dude.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the thing for me is like fairy consider winter as like falling to death.
Mm.
But I kind of look at fairy culture, and I'm like,
Yeah. If that's death for them, maybe that's good because we've seen what their life is like.
And yeah, as the White Chief said, like if Guillermet is going to fall into a pattern of being a helpful old mentor who loves people, like
tragedy.
Oh no.
That's like a running theme because, like, when Nicolette came, he's like, "Oh, I want to give you whatever you want," and when Clem came, he was like, "Oh, here's some helpful advice
and a lightsaber,
Take this; it's dangerous outside." And
even
it's not
even his like duel with Marisica, where he was throwing a spear at her a bunch of times until she was trained into behaving a certain way. Like training people is literally his like only shtick, and it's not a bad one.
It's not a bad one. I'm just because Guillermet clearly has like issues with it, so he's like it's a good pattern to fall into, but like this is still like I'm sure like a scary thing for him to like grapple with, to like losing your own mind and such. Like it's definitely bad by fairy culture, but I think there's definitely like a personal aspect to it where it's like he's like losing a big part of it himself.
It almost feels like a creative person abandoning their dreams of being a rock star and settling down and getting a real job, right? Where it's tragic for the person at the time, and for a culture that's obsessed with drama and delight. The idea of I'm no longer gonna play big stadiums. I'm gonna be an accountant. Like that feels like the end of everything. But it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. There are worse things.
I hope he finds happiness.
It's kind of accepting. For Guillermet, it's accepting that there's not going to be new things in his life, which is a bit tragic. But yeah, I like maybe you can find peace and stability. We haven't really seen an actual winter fairy. We've just seen some of the practitioners who interact with them.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to actually see the winter court. Like maybe meet some other winter fairy.
I don't think they're fantastic.
Guillermet's
they're probably not going to be nice people. But I'd be interested to hear their perspective on like whether they have like died. Like, is it sort of this thing where they see themselves as the enlightened fairies who are just like, do you know how much easier this shit is now?
No.
Like, oh my god.
Guillermet's gonna be asking Marisha to join him soon. Because there was that. Okay, I'm not. That's a tinfoil hat theory, but like in like the whole Fae doc a while back, like in the extra material. Like the winter fae we do see aren't necessarily like we had like that one guy who's trying to drag them all, that close person to Guillermet who became the journey. Like it's not. Some of them aren't necessarily people I'd want to meet in a dark alley.
I just feel that winter fae are a lot extremely rigid. Like I can imagine if he falls to that and becomes this mentor figure, every person who comes by, he says, "Oh, hi, Lucy," and goes through this same script, and goes through the same duel, and goes through this exact same lesson every time anyone comes by to Lucy, or something like that.
I think I saw like a Reddit comment or like something similar where it's like, would have been like really like horrifying after like the whole Clem speech is if like some random girl came by and he was like, and let me tell you, we live in a world of where words matter, and like just the whole verbatim repeat. I guess there's like a if it's his pattern to like be a cool mentor, there's like the dark side where like not everyone he's teaching is going to be like people who are suited for this life or like who are necessarily have good intentions for the trio, right? Like, like the practice hasn't necessarily made their lives worse, but like there are a couple like innocents in the story, and like Charles can attest to it that like some people don't necessarily need the practice to or like this world to make their lives better.
So, what else should we touch on? We've done a fair amount of reflecting. Is it time for our traditional question that we ask every single guest on the show,
no.
Elliot?
Yeah.
Ah,
So, I don't know. Wait, which one are you talking about, Reuben? Because I was going to hit them next with the who is your favorite Kennetier?
That's what I was gonna. That's what I was referring to. Yes.
Okay.
Oh dear.
I mean, not who is your favorite Kennetier, Elliot. The question is, which is the best Kennetier?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
oh no.
It hurts. It hurts.
It's
This is
Verona.
not a subjective question.
Okay.
You're not allowed to.
Cam-
have a
Cam just
subjective
coming
answer.
out swinging.
Okay. All right, Cam.
Cool. Okay, so we've got one correct answer.
Do you
so
want to
far.
justify or just chuck it out there?
Do I need to justify?
Some would say
Oh,
yes.
God.
I don't know.
I
I just find her very likable, very relatable.
Mm.
I will say that I was on the Verona train, but the recent arc, I think Lucy, at least this is the best kind of tier on my tier list for this arc, has to be Lucy. She's really endeared herself to me this arc. That
Good.
The last
Now
one
that's
was
what I
brutal.
call the correct answer.
So, in order to round this out,
Yeah.
why do you like Avery?
Well, see, it's very tempting because I do love all of them, and I want to say that I love them all equally, because that's the appropriate thing to do. And in one sense, it's correct, right? That I have gone over the course of the story to loving each of them,
Yes,
very
of course.
dearly.
Yeah.
I think when it comes down to it, if I had to, hypothetically, if I had to see the story of just one of them, the three of them are all tied together and they've all got wonderful stories to tell individually as well. But I think if I had to hear only one of those stories, the one that I wouldn't want to let go of is Verona's, right? That
I see that,
Wow.
yeah.
that I like the others. You see a way out for them, right? You see how Lucy is becoming the person that she wants to be. She's got the
Mhm.
earring that's sort of starting to reflect some of that. She's growing stronger. She's growing kinder. Avery, absolutely, so much stuff to get through still with her home life and her self-confidence and
Mhm.
sport. Apparently, I don't know. She loses points for me just for that. Not that I hate sport, but I can't connect.
Holy moly.
But Verona is just in a situation in her life where, there are hypothetical outs out there, and some of them are much worse than others, and I cannot tell which way she's going. And her story has to involve the others, right? Because we sort of seen where it goes if the others aren't involved. But just in the nightmare with Alpi, but I can't. Verona's still the one with the most sort of internal tension that's not yet to be resolved, and so for that reason, I vote Verona.
Very
And
interesting.
I immediately cringe away from it because I love them all. But yeah.
No, what you're implying when you answer one Kennetier is the best is that you hate the other two. So now
Yeah,
everyone
clearly.
There can only be one winner here.
And Verona's won the vote. I mean, I think this is the first time Verona has won the vote on a reflecting episode like this.
It only took 7.
No one took 7 of them.
She did have a good arc though, so that's fair enough.
This was a very strong arc for her.
Yeah.
Yes.
She condemned a guy to eternal
Yeah,
torment.
yeah, she killed someone.
Woohoo.
Thumbs up.
It only took murder.
Reuben, I don't think he's dead. I think
Sure,
it's much
sorry,
worse
yes.
than him
True.
being dead.
She ruined his day.
Yep.
And every day thereafter.
Cool. Well, should we move on to some other stuff that we want to discuss? It's always worth us taking a look back at this arc specifically, this arc as a whole, especially diving into Gone Ahead as an arc title. What a fun, terrible pun it is.
Thank you, Wildbow.
Yeah, officially confirmed by Wildbow immediately after posting the chapter, which he thought of it and was like, oh, I can't wait to reveal this pun to people.
He was chuckling the entire time.
I could see this pun coming before the story's written, when he's just like, what am I going to name my arc titles? He's like, yes, this one is on the list. We're going with this choice.
I just love it's because it's such an augury thing as well. It was spelled out for us that he was gonna have a gone head.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. That Mario would describe the state of Alexander. Gone ahead. That's going to happen in the story. Just wait for the Super Mario crossover. It's coming.
I'm waiting. I'm
Oh
waiting.
dear.
The Super Mario other that Ray summons for class. Yes.
Well, I
Waiting.
mean, if anyone was going to summon it, Ray or Zed, right? Like they boot up the cursed N64.
Zed has the gamer glove.
Yeah.
The gamer glove. This is how it all ties back.
Yeah.
They summon Super Mario. They summon Ben Drowned from a Cursed Legend of Zelda cartridge.
Oh, no,
they
this
summon
is cursed.
all the video game copy pasta others.
What I think was so, I once read this really long post about how, so in the original Super Mario Bros, there's that first Goomba in the first level,
Mm.
and somebody was saying that's actually probably the video game enemy that's killed the most people of all time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to summon that, the 1-1 Goomba.
Goomba, yeah.
That's like one of the most powerful techno
other
others.
that exists.
And like it's almost 50-50, right? Like does it,
Yeah.
does it, act as barely in opposition at all, or does it instantly destroy the person in front of you?
Does
Yeah,
it
best
instantly
used
destroy
against-
you?
Best used against novices.
Notably,
Um,
it can only move left.
This is where
But
it
what
comes
is left?
off.
Oh shit, I summoned it facing north. Oh no.
Oh, no.
Now it's coming towards me. Ah!
Just like standing in the corner screaming as it just like inches towards you.
As it waddles over, yeah.
Yeah.
I can time this jump. I can jump over it. I've got this.
Dun 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 dun.
I mean, this is dumb, but I was just going to mention that Goombas have a folklore to them. They might be in the Pact verse.
Wait,
the other
they
verse.
do?
Oh,
They do.
no.
Well,
What?
okay. Everyone
Yes.
stay tuned for a monster corner next week.
Oh.
I'm researching Goombas.
Oh, so we found the Carmine Killer, guys.
Yeah, it was yeah, Goomba. So anyway, to get back on track, are there any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about this arc, about the arc title, or anything else that we want to dive into?
Yeah. I'll quickly go in and do the definition part, which is like,
Sure.
To go ahead or to get the go ahead. It's like, to get the go ahead is to get like a signal from someone to proceed. Like how Alexander was meant to give the go ahead to unleash Durashay's mate. There's also like, if someone goes ahead with something, that's to continue or proceed, especially if there are problems or challenges. So yeah, we obviously addressed the big pun, but like I feel like the other big sort of way this ties into the arc for me is like so much of this came down to whether or not people like Bristow are actually giving the go ahead, for things like the Aware. Like Bristow was constantly hiding behind this bullshit of like, oh, I didn't tell Kevin to kill Layla. I just simply put him in that room and was like, hey, look at that picture. Okay, bye. So like, like whether he was actually giving the go ahead, I think was sort of a big part of it.
I've written way too much in the notes here, but the bit that I'll pull out, just that idea of people going ahead with something despite warning comes up, a few times here. Notably, when Shelley tells Kevin, "Hey, there was a kid in that fight, in that gas station fire. That's not cool. Oh, hey, here's this photo of this other kid. Let's do the same thing." And he goes ahead with it. The Brownies get the go-ahead to go after Bristow, and then after Verona, and then after Bristow, and then after Verona, and then after Bristow. The moment where Bristow goes ahead with giving himself over to the Brownies rather than whatever other fates were available to him, when Alexander said, "Oh, there's a way we can talk about this," and Verona sort of offered that olive branch a bit, and Bristow was like, "Nah, I'm heading out." An honorable mention to the Brownies who went ahead with taking Bristow, even though this condemns them to have to be in his presence for the foreseeable future.
A twist.
Are they the real losers?
Yeah.
And
They're actually suffering the fate worse than
exactly.
Jed.
This was the trap Alexander set up all along. But I think ultimately just that, because I was pulling all of these together, and to some degree it just comes down to characters doing things. But I think throughout this sense of going ahead with something despite the warnings that come up ties into this idea of characters and groups and things having this momentum, right? That they're going to keep on acting the way that they're going to act without paying attention to the consequences, right? That Bristow goes ahead with his plan, even though it's going to mean Lila dies and the Blue Heron Institute is shrunk down. Alexander goes ahead with his plan, even though it means turning on his last few allies. Whereas the Kenneteers pay attention, right? When the little people who are being trodden over, they listen to them, they reach out, they make the connections, and they still go ahead with certain things when they need doing. But ultimately, they're the ones paying attention and not just sort of plowing through things without paying attention to the consequences.
Anyone else?
I just
No.
took it pretty literally. Ted went ahead to challenge the group. John went ahead to kill Alexander. Everyone's just going ahead to do one thing that's really fucking scary, and that's it.
I mean, yeah, because like Avery, as a fairly like simple one as well. Avery spent a lot of this arc going out ahead as a sort of scout, like
Yes.
to the arena monster. That time Lucy kicked her into the ruins. That wasn't so much going ahead as being sent ahead, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah.
Yeah, I'm of Campus mind mostly here. I just really like that pun.
To be perfectly honest, I didn't realize it was a pun until you all started talking about it.
I had to look. I had to read the Reddit comments. It is what it is. I liked it.
Yeah, I had people pointed out to me. I was just sort of chatting. Somebody was like, "Oh, it's the best pun ever," and I was like, "What's the pun?" They're like, "Alexander's gone ahead." And I was like, "Oh no!"
Oh my god!
I think Lucy says it. Maybe not in that order. I think she's gone. His head is gone. But it's just yeah.
Alexander's gone pale. You say?
Yeah. Just for a man who thought so highly of himself to go out for a pun. It's tragic.
But such a good one. It's worth it, I think, for such a good pun.
I wasn't expecting it from Bo, and I think that really makes it.
I'd like to think that there were times during writing this arc that he was like, okay, and now Alexander gets. Oh wait, no, I can't put him there because he does need to get his head blown off at the end.
Maybe that's where Alexander's been all this time. Very interesting.
Cool. So I guess we should dive into some theories and stuff now, right? Like,
yes.
The other obligatory question we always have to ask is who's done it? Who dones it?
Yeah, this is the time for bold and specific
Bold and
predictions.
Yeah, I've got to call your
theories.
shots.
All right, I've got a weird one.
All right, hit us.
I don't think it's Charles.
What?
What?
Very curious.
And my reasoning for this is simple. In a murder mystery, it is never the most obvious person.
It does feel like he has to have been involved in like at least helping make Khan require, right?
Yeah.
It feels that way, but
is it against his will, maybe?
And we know he has bad karma. We know the world is against him.
That's true. That's true. He's basically designed to be a red herring.
A Carmine herring.
It is a.
A Carmine. That's what he'll be called when he takes the position.
I mean, I guess like that makes it because if you think about it in universe as well, like if I was doing this and it's like, well, I need somebody who they're gonna like I need somebody to sort of make them think it was them.
You need a fall guy.
You're gonna pick
He's a
Charles.
good fall guy. I mean,
like,
explicitly he's a fall guy.
Yeah, I'm gonna do summoner stuff so people think it's Charles because he's got bad karma, so they'll probably just go down that route. Like, yeah.
All they needed was masks, just masks, and it got pointed at him.
Well, I think out of all of the others, I think Matthew coincidentally has possibly the practitioner knowledge to take advantage of that.
I do see someone like a practitioner at some point being poised to take the furs just because the sense of a practitioner is taking over the role that was meant to be an other, so like neatly ties into things. I don't know that that's the way it's going to end, but I could see it like that being a point. Even if it's just the Kenneteers get their hands on the furs at some point and then they go, if we'd done this, we could have ultimate power, so that they can turn it down. I could see that. I see that in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I feel that. Okay, so Cantus is betting it's not going to be Charles. Who are you feeling, White Duke?
Okay, so if I'm going to be like basic for a second, I think the evidence currently points towards some sort of Marissa Edith conspiracy. I think Marissa, being mentioned as someone who absconds, children potentially, but then like potentially divvies them up for, cures to ailments and things. Was a little throwaway line in the her introduction with Gilame. So I could see basic prediction: Marisica, co-conspired with Edith because Marisica wanted to spin a story because she likes Gilame, and also the killing of the Carmine Beast could make things like drastically interesting across the area. Edith needs the Carmine Furs because she's in a dire situation. The Doom's coming after her. And it's trapped for now, but there's basically a ticking time bomb on that. And she herself is fleeting in a more general sense. So, and if she's either working out from under Matthew or hoping to like get powerful enough to destroy the Doom, whatever the case is, there's a tension there that's sort of sitting there, and Matthew seems to think they're okay living with, but Edith definitely does not seem to think it's okay to just continue like this. So that's my basic theory.
Right.
My out there theory is that the Carmine Beast isn't really dead. It's one of those things where it was sort of brought up early on that death for a thing like the Carmine Beast isn't, as cut and dry as it is with mortals, right? That there's a sense in which, because the power was still there.
I see where this is going. Okay.
So, I've also been paying attention to the arc titles and trying to sort of spin together what's the overarching theme, and there seems to be something to do with like leaving or vanishing. It's gone ahead.
Sort of like proving, perhaps.
Exactly, right? So my theory is that, like a magic trick, because this is a story about young girls learning magic, the Carmine Beast has disappeared and will reappear. That's the theory, is that at some point the Carmine Beast will be brought back like a magic trick.
I do quite like this theory.
Yeah.
Because we had that, there was a bit at the end of Can We Talk About the Girls, where it sort of became apparent that somebody has the furs and they're planning on putting them on. But what if it's just like you said, what if they've just taken the furs and like separated the Carmine Beast and the roll from who was wearing it? And so, if there was some little red person in town,
someone new to the town who wasn't here before.
Cherry Pop is the consciousness of the Carmine Beast without the furs. You heard it here first.
The thing that makes men fear the night.
Look, guys, the first stage is denial.
Holy moly.
Also, this may be a bit of a cop-out, but don't we already kind of have the boring answer in that the Hungry Choir did it?
Well,
but they were just the murder weapon.
They're the murder weapon. Y'all just pointed at the Carmine. Someone did the pointing. That's the thing we're looking for.
Now we're looking for the pointer.
At this point, for me, whodunit is talking about who made into the Hungry Choir.
Who engineered the situation. That way. I'm still not entirely clear how the Hungry Choir... Like, did they just, like, bite the Carmine Beast over and over? Like, did they just, like, eat chunks of it? Like, the mechanics of it.
Yeah, because...
No, the Carmine Beast didn't sing the song.
Of course.
Because, like, we get, like, ideas, like, how hard it'd be to kill the Carmine Beast, right? Like, when we're, like, first meeting the judges, right? They're like, how do you kill the Carmine Beast? Can you make all violence stop across Toronto or something like that? And it's like that. Does the Hungry Choir really have that kind of power?
Although actually, if it transported the Carmine Beast to its dimension as the beast that needed to get eaten, then in its realm, all of the like other people in Toronto become like the weird faceless witnesses. Things, right?
I see.
So possibly in the Hungry Choir's subdimension or whatever, there is no violence apart from the choir itself.
Okay.
And if that ritual comes to an end, then they end up just like eating the Carmine Beast that was served as dinner.
I do like this theory, not gonna lie, because like as an explanation for like how could the Hungry Choir have like the power or the means to quote unquote stop all violence in Toronto or whatever. I like that. I like that way of figuring it all out. Okay. Yeah, I'm down for this. Yeah, my prediction wasn't quite as flashy. What was it? I was doing the boring one with like Edith and Matthew, but like the thing that was bothering me was like from the interrogation, right? like they get to the interrogation, a lot of it about is like their home life, right? And like how they consider family and like the doom is haunting their lives. So first one, this is a side theory, but I kind of maybe Matthew follows his dad's footsteps a little bit, and he extends his life somehow. Because it's really between the two, technically. Matthew's the one that's like, quote unquote, in terms of like living a long, fulfilling life. It's whether he gets killed somehow. It seems a little bit, perhaps convenient that he knows a little bit of magic to extend his life. But in terms of actually who did it, I think, Edith and Matthew did it, killed the Carmine Beast. And somehow that power is going to translate to, taking out the dude. Like maybe one of them wears it. And like similar to how Carmine Beast was going to, forcibly recruit Guillerme. Maybe they do that to the Doom and they co-opt it somehow. And this is how they start the family they've always been wanting. Not necessarily the Doom, but like the Doom will be out of the picture, quote unquote.
The two of them and their young baby Doom.
Oh man.
No, I think that's a strong motive for Matthew and Edith, right? They're clearly so desperate to get out from under the thumb.
It's gonna be sympathetic. I refuse to like believe that like, Matthew's just like scheming in the background. Like all the Kenneth others are like relatively chill. They're just hanging out in this like small Canadian town. Like I'm not expecting anything like truly like nefarious, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, I keep laughing at the idea of this having a Scooby-Doo ending. If it weren't for you rotten kids and your possum too.
Who's the most likely to be the Scooby-Doo villain, though?
Unfortunately, Charles.
No, it is. He just looks like a Scooby-Doo villain, doesn't he?
Just sort of shaggy janitor type.
Shaggy, homeless. Yeah, he's such an obvious red herring, but he manages to like still be relevant in terms of like an investigation.
Yeah, it's fun because he's a red herring, but you also can't help but think that it still might be him.
But yeah, because he's so obvious, so he couldn't be the suspect.
Exactly.
But is that what Wildboy wants?
Oh no! You get
how many layers? Yeah, how many layers deep does this karma go?
Well, it's like playing with fairy, right?
Yeah.
Like you just you can't try it. You can't try to get on there.
No, too much double think.
My last sort of specific predictions. I think Toad Swallow is one of the more interesting. I mean, they're all fascinating, but of the Kenneth others, the one who's sort of playing things close to the chest, not just in a I'm being cagey around these new practitioners in town, because he's familiar with young practitioners, right? He knows their games, he knows what they're capable of. Instead, he feels like he's keeping secrets like for the long term, right? Like whatever happens in Kenneth, he wants to be ready. My read on Toad Swallow, and it partly ties back to the Awakening ritual as well, because I'm still like every arc or so bringing back up that list of who entered by what and left by what, and seeing if I can tease that apart. And I think that's a trap to some degree, because my brain is just going to go around in circles. But I think my current sort of general theory is that what they entered by is associated with who they are or what they are currently, and what they left by is their like future trajectory, as in where they want to go or where they're going.
Okay.
So you get the example of John, who enters by the blade and leaves by the blade, which makes sense. Most of the goblins who enter by the blade, violence makes sense for them, and leave by the skull, because death is what awaits goblins in the end. Except for Toad Swallow, who enters by the blade like any other goblin, but leaves by the hourglass. In the sense that I think he's the goblin who's changing with the times, right? He's the one who's willing to put on the suit and the monocle. He's dressing up.
CEO goblin.
He's dealing with practitioners. I think in the narrative of others versus practitioners, in the power dynamic there, I think Toad Swallow is the closest thing we have to like a class trader, right? Where he's he's the one who's going, all of my options laid out in front of me. I'm going to recognize the way the wind is blowing. I'm going to see how practitioners are taking everything over, and so I'm going to bend myself to be a polite goblin if that's what it takes for me to advance in the future, right? My sense there is that I think it was mentioned previously. People have had the theory that Toad Swallow's plan is just to swap sides whichever way the wind blows. Whichever side he thinks is going to end up donning the Carmine furs, he wants to join on their side. I want to go a step further and say that Toadswallow is planning to support the New World Order, and he has a specific intention of what that looks like in terms of either there being no Carmine Beast or there being a practitioner who fills the role of what the Carmine Beast was meant to be, but that Toadswallow is setting up and planning to be the new breed of goblin, the new breed of other, the one who sort of grovels before the practitioners because that's what he needs to do to survive.
I really like this theory, especially because Toadswallow, he's building a faction in the background. He's playing the. I really like his quote unquote neutral party in the background because whichever side wins, the goblins now have a bigger say in Kennet, especially if the new Kennet others get off that second class citizen status they're on right now.
I am totally on board with there's something about Toadswallow, but I kind of have a bit of an opposite. Opposite read on him. I think he might be very much on the same page as Miss. Maybe it's just because I like him. But
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping he's gonna be the opposite. He's gonna be somebody who's helping things fall into place. Maybe that's overly optimistic, but I got my heart on Toadswallow's side.
I thought he was doing all of that just to fuck with people. Basic Goblin 101, the motive is to fuck with people.
Yes, we're giving him too much label here. Perhaps what he wants us to think.
A bit too much credit.
Much too much credit.
I was going, for a goblin to bend over backwards to, be polite, to be, like Sir Toadswallow. He must have to have some bigger plan, but he is a goblin, so maybe he doesn't. maybe he just likes it screws with people to go, why is he wearing a monocle?
I do like that idea. All right. Do we have any final things to think about for Gone Ahead or Pale in general? Any final reflections?
I'm glad we finally heard about the Oni. I was going to scream if, for the third time, the Oni lore was denied. The Oni did nothing wrong. Swan on that.
They're the heroes of the story. Well, I guess that's as good a place to leave it as any.
Yeah.
Camtist, Side Zero, White Duke, thank you all for joining us. Do you have anything that you want to plug or mention to our listeners?
We could mention the Discord server.
Oh, yes, the Discord server.
So we're all coming from the Parahumans Discord server, which is a little hard to get to nowadays. The link for it is buried in the FAQ section of the Ward site. Is
it not on the Pale site?
I think there's an invite on the subreddit as well, in the Parahuman subreddit.
There should be, I believe. I have to double check, but yeah, there's a lot of people who talk about the serial over there. If anyone wants to join in.
We'll make sure that Reuben and Elliot put a link in the
definitely in the show notes.
Yes.
Yep.
And if I say it confidently enough, they'll have to do it.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's going to be there, and Elliot's editing, so I don't have to worry about it.
Some sort of augury trick, right?
It's a great place to come chat about Pale as it comes out. There's a thriving packed dice community, so if you're interested in the idea of not just following along with these characters, but taking on the role of some poor soul who's been put into a practitioner lifestyle, there are games starting all the time. So come on over, check it out. There's delicious lore there. So
yes, the lore. We need to. There is lore there, and there are perhaps packed dice stocks made by Wildbow.
It is a little bubblegum and duct tape, but it's fun.
The Hangmaiden doc I talked about in our previous episode was one that I found on that server. So that's the sort of stuff you'll find.
There's a collector doc as well, and I was thinking about it. And perhaps we form some sort of streak here with some sort of collection of Mile End, I guess, some sort of set.
There's a lot of fun stuff.
Yes. Lots of games.
Awesome. Well, yeah, again, thanks for joining us. Obviously, it's been great to have you on and hear your reflection. If We will, we'll pop the link to the Discord server in our show notes down below. So definitely check that out. And while you're checking things out, why not check out our Twitter account, which is at Media MT Podcast. You can follow us on Twitter and see notifications when episodes come out and live reads and stuff like that.
Yes, you can also head to toofmedia.com to find out more about this show or any of our other shows. There's just too many to list at this point. Do the Right Thing is currently, I think, wrapping up a big contest, and if you want to get your creative writing on, check that one out.
Yeah, definitely. If you want to support the Doof Media Network, you can head to patreon.com/doofmedia and become a backer to get access to all kinds of exclusive things like a Discord server or bonus content or all kinds of great stuff.
And don't forget Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow. We wouldn't all be here today without Wildbow.
Yeah, so make sure you definitely go and check it out. And that's the end of the episode. Thanks for joining us, folks. And yeah, see you around.